Yeah, just please get help, and do so in a way that serves you. And what I mean by that is that sometimes the first place you go, that therapist might not fit, might not be the right person. So don't be afraid to change things and keep looking until you find a place that is supportive, because you deserve to feel joy. There's so much joy in being a mother. And watching your child grow up, and you deserve to experience that and see those moments, because I can tell you now, looking at my 16-year-old, almost 17-year-old who's getting ready to go to college, and the time flies. Everyone says that, but it really does. So know that you deserve to experience and feel joy. And so get that help, so you're not letting that, or so that depression and anxiety is not the thief of your joy.
This is NICU Babies Parent Support with Kathryn Whitaker, a podcast from Hand to Hold, a national nonprofit that provides free personalized support, resources, and community before, during, and after a NICU stay. My conversations here focus on education and personal stories with medical and hospital professionals, counselors, therapists, and NICU moms and dads from across the country. So whether you're preparing for a NICU stay, you're currently there, or you're months and years past your stay, you belong here. The NICU is hard. We're here to help. I'm your host, Kathryn Whitaker, the mom of 6 children, including my very own NICU baby, and I'm so grateful that you're here. Well, Season 6 is officially here. I am super excited about this life after a NICU admission. I should probably spell that, LIFE, life after a NICU admission. That there are so many topics and people that I wanted to bring you, but I felt like it was really important today to start with postpartum depression, postpartum anxiety. You may hear it called PMAD, so perinatal mood and anxiety disorders. So they are all encompassed. And I felt like that was a good place to start. I will tell you that when I was thinking about who are the people that I want to interview this season, the list was long, but the person at the top of the list was Dr. Rankins. She's been a follow of mine for a while. I've really appreciated her perspective, her credentials. She is very credentialed. I'm going to share that with you in a minute. But I felt like she had the expertise that could really benefit you. And quite frankly, all of the guests this season, I spent a lot of time thinking about who are the people that inform me, that inform the medical community, and then how can they be good informers for you? How can you get the information that you need to make the very best decision for you and your family? Because it varies for all of us. But I wanted to make sure that the guests that I had were excellent guests, and she was at the top of the list. So if you are finding yourself flailing and you have just been admitted to the NICU, this is the season for you. But also if you are well past, maybe you're like me, y'all. Maybe you're 14, 15, maybe you're 20 years past your time in the NICU. I do believe that there are bits and pieces from this particular season that are really going to resonate with you and how you operate as your preemie is not such a preemie baby anymore, but as they're growing up into a big NICU kid, that there are great opportunities for you to really glean some great information from this particular series. So today we're really focusing on what is PPD, what is PPA, and what does that mean, particularly from a medicine standpoint. So Dr. Nicole is the person that I reached out to, and I know that you're going to love her. She believes that giving birth in a U.S. hospital can be scary, but that it doesn't have to be. Dr. Nicole is a Duke University trained, board certified practicing obgyn, and she's the mom of 2 who empowers first-time moms to have the beautiful birth experience they deserve. And I think it's worth mentioning that one of her babies is a NICU baby. Over her 20-year career, she's helped more than 1,000 babies into this world, and she is a proud HBCU grad of both Spelman College and North Carolina A&T State University. Her popular podcast, All About Pregnancy and Birth, is a top 50 parenting podcast with over 2 million downloads. If you haven't listened to it, you definitely should. So with that, let's chat. Well, I am thrilled to have Dr. Nicole Rankins here with me today. She's the expert, so I'm just the listener, but thank you so much for being here.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm excited to chat.
I know. You know what? I have big earrings on. If you're watching YouTube, I almost wore my big hoop earrings in your honor. I know that you're a fan. So
I have so many hoop earrings. I love hoop earrings. So yes. And I like yours. They're very pretty.
Thank you. Thank you. Well, I know that in the first part of the segment before you came on that I was telling people all about your background, but I did not, while I told them that you have 2 degrees, I did not tell them what your undergraduate degrees are in mathematics and mechanical engineering. So, Dr. Nicole, how did you get from that to medicine? That feels like
that's a good
like
question.
mechanical engineering to doctor feels like a big leap. I love it.
It is a big leap. So I've always been like a math and sciencey nerd kind of person. So I majored in math, not really knowing what I wanted to do. I just don't shoot me, but calculus was my favorite subject in high school.
Us? That was not my favorite.
And then I could do a program where I do an extra year and I could get an engineering degree. And I was like, that sounds smart. Let me do that. So I did that. And then literally in between that one, it was a dual degree engineering program at Spelman College and then North Carolina A&T State University. In between those times, I spent a year in Kenya. And that sort of opened my eyes to like, I saw a hospital there and that just kind of put a little bug, like this is completely different, the healthcare system. And then when I got back, the honest to God truth, I was in the bathroom and I looked in the mirror and I saw myself, I was in the dorm standing at the sink, looked in the mirror, saw myself wearing a white coat. And I said, I think I want to go to medical school. And it just from there, I just started investigating and looking into it, but it was really like a vision, for lack of a better way of saying it, that said, you're supposed to be a doctor. And I followed that little nugget and here we are.
Well, you had the driven part. I mean, I don't know. I can't think of anyone that's told me that they love calculus except for my children's current high school calculus teacher.
Right.
But when you know what you love, you know. So it feels like that probably, as you look at it, in hindsight, it all sort of makes sense.
It does.
So I know that medicine, particularly when it comes to the neonatal intensive care unit, there's a lot of bits and pieces. And a lot of times we spend many of our podcasts talking about babies and what life looks like after a NICU admission. But I want to back up a little bit because I know that postpartum depression and postpartum anxiety are a big part of perhaps the NICU stay, but of many women's experiences. So how prevalent is postpartum depression, postpartum anxiety, and just the general population? And then how prevalent is it in NICU?
Yeah, it's about 20 to 25%-ish roughly in general population. I don't know the exact number off the top of my head about NICU, but I'm going to say confidently that it's higher because being a NICU mom myself, it is a stressful situation. And I certainly believe looking back, that I had anxiety more than anything. But certainly more common. I would say almost expect that you're going to have some level of sadness, and appropriately so, because your baby's in the NICU. You're also going to have some level of anxiety when you take that baby home because I
like how you said that so nice, some level, an exceptionally high level. Yeah.
We're all, so the more that you can kind of prepare yourself for that and know that it's coming and then have strategies to manage it, I think is great, which is something I didn't have 16 years ago when it happened to me, for sure.
I agree. Mine was 14 years ago. So it sounds like we're sort of in the same boat. So sometimes we use them interchangeably, PPD, PPA, but I know that isn't necessarily accurate. What's the difference between the two?
Yeah, depression is more like sadness. You can't do your normal activities. You can't get excited about having the baby. It's more like a sadness component than anything else. Whereas anxiety is more you're worried that something's going to happen. Just to a level where you can't function almost. It's like excessive. You're constantly checking on the baby because you're worried that they're breathing. You're looking at the monitor to make sure everything is okay. So that level of like something is going to happen is keeping you from experiencing some joy, is keeping you from functioning on a regular basis. Like you're scared to take a shower because you're worried you're going to miss something or something's going to happen, that kind of thing.
Now I'm thinking back to the days just after discharge from the NICU, and I had the reassurance of being able to see the numbers. I could look up and I could see the O2 level, I could see the
Right.
heart rate, and so when we came home, I would find myself looking up, and I'm like, "Where's the numbers? I know where the numbers are," and
Right.
like the anxiety was so high, and I don't think I got any sleep because I was constantly checking our
Yeah.
son. So,
Yeah.
at like what point, Dr. Nicole, do you look at that is normal behavior, and what point are you like, maybe I need to go talk to somebody?
I think it's when it interferes with your regular ability to function or experience any joy. Like you just like it's obsessive. Or if other people are telling you that they notice that your partner or family members like, it just seems like you're a little bit, not I know things are stressful, but you're not quite yourself, or you found that you're crying a lot. So it's really when it interferes with your normal ability to function. Or if you yourself are concerned and you're like, I don't feel right, I don't feel this is too much, then definitely seek out some help.
So, I know, and I don't think I realized this until we started this whole series of podcasting, that PPA and PPD, so we hear postpartum and we think, okay, so that happens after the baby. Do women experience postpartum depression, or I should say perinatal depression and anxiety when they're pregnant?
Yeah, so it's the whole spectrum is called perinatal mood and anxiety disorders, and it encompasses both pregnancy and the postpartum period. So, absolutely, people have anxiety and depression during pregnancy. Very frequently, it's because they had it before pregnancy and it just
Mhm.
continues into pregnancy. It can develop during pregnancy, but it's more likely to develop after the baby is born. And I think we talk a lot. We've gotten pretty good, I think, about talking about postpartum depression. Like we know about it, we hear about it, we screen about it, but it's actually anxiety that seems to be more prevalent. A lot of that is because of social media and comparisonitis,
Yes.
thinking that you should be a certain way because this is what you see presented to in front of you, and when you're not that way, then you're worried that something is wrong, and that can create some anxiety. But certainly people can have issues with depression and anxiety during pregnancy.
Well, I'm thinking back, so 14 years ago, I thought Instagram was a photo editing app. When our son was in the NICU, I still laugh about that. But it was just Facebook, but it's interesting that the place sometimes that I would go to connect to people, I would find hashtags, and that's how I found so many other NICU and preemie moms.
Mhm.
But then it also becomes a place where I was like, am I doing this right? Should I be more
Yes.
worried about that?
Yeah.
Is that
Yeah.
something that now I need to put on my list of things to be concerned about? And so it feels magnified in both places, and so finding the balance is sometimes tricky.
It's so important because I think we all struggle with social media. This is actually something in my own life recently that I've thought a lot about and try to work on, is like social media is a blessing and a curse. It can be
Yeah.
great for, like you said, to connect to people who you otherwise never would have connected to, where you don't feel
Right.
so alone, because having a NICU baby can certainly feel very isolating and lonely if there's not anyone right around you who you can connect with. But it can also just be like a rabbit hole of just like showing you things that aren't
Right.
necessarily helpful or making you feel good. So finding that balance is really, really important.
Or people that you think may be helpful, but really like have zero credibility, or they
Yeah.
are they saying things, and I'm like, I'm sorry, what's your
That's
background?
right.
Gonna need
Yes.
gonna need to see your
A little
curriculum
bit more
vitae.
information. Yes. Yes. Yes.
The 60-second reel on TikTok is not giving me enough information. So I think sometimes it can be hard. So if a person, Dr. Nicole, is feeling like, okay, I think maybe I know we talked a little about what some of those symptoms may look like outside of your normal. What do they do? Where do they go? Should it be their OB-GYN? Should it be their partner?
Yeah.
Like, where do they go to get help?
This is the sort of the disappointing but also truthful part. We as OBGYNs get very little training about treating maternal mental health. It's just not a lot of our training. And add to that, that you're probably not going to see your OBGYN for 6 weeks. Yes, we
Right.
try to touch base sooner, we should. And we're kind of changing that, but still, for the most part, you're not going to see your OBGYN for 6 weeks. So, a great place to start is actually a website called Postpartum Support International. This is a great website where you can get resources about postpartum anxiety, postpartum depression. You can find therapists in your area or groups in your area where you can get help on a more urgent basis. And then, of course, there's a hotline now you can call for anybody who has like mental health concerns to help connect you with resources. So Postpartum Support International is a great place to start to help connect you with some resources.
Sometimes people would say like, oh, so I have 6 babies. I should have come clean at the very beginning. So I have 6 babies. My 5th was my NICU baby. But I know that a lot of people would tell me, oh, Kathryn, it's just the baby blues. Like, you know how this works and it'll eventually go away. What is considered baby blues? And then, because I know that's not the same thing as PPA or PPD.
Yeah.
When does it move from that to, because I think every mom, I'm going to say this confidently, every mom after a baby goes through some period of massive adjustment. It's a mental shift. It's huge.
Yeah.
It affects every part of your life. So
Absolutely.
It's impossible.
Yeah.
But
absolutely.
How do you know the difference between the two?
Sure. After 2 to 3 weeks, if you're still feeling sad, if you're still feeling concerns about depression or anxiety, then it's considered not just a baby blues and postpartum depression or anxiety. Right. So after 3 weeks or so, if you're still having challenges, then definitely seek out help.
I know I was visiting with our founder the other day of Hand to Hold, and we were just visiting about PPD and PPA specifically. And she said, which you and I both mentioned at the beginning, NICU moms have to be, in the higher risk category. Mm-hmm. But she said so many of them don't know because either their baby's still in the NICU, and so they're missing their own 6-week checkup, or they haven't really made connection point with their pediatrician yet because they're still in the NICU, or they're balancing multiple specialist visits. And the last thing on their mind is to go to the regular pediatrician because they've got a developmental pediatrician or they've got this other specialist. And so it's sort of like things get lost in the middle. So whether it's a NICU mom, whether it's a mom of color, I know there's this gap. Like, how do we bridge the gap in a perfect world? How do we bridge the gap of knowing where they are and what our limitations are, and they're just not getting the intervention that they need?
That is an excellent question.
This podcast is produced by Hand to Hold, a national nonprofit, but we're more than simply a podcast. Be sure to download our app in the Apple Store or on Google Play, or you can visit our website to discover all the ways that we can support you as a NICU parent at handtohold.org. You can join one of our support groups, sign up for counseling, find loss and bereavement support, request a peer mentor, or check out our educational resources and family stories. And all of that is at no cost to you.
These days, we screen for postpartum depression in the hospital before you leave. And now you're quite likely to get screened for postpartum depression at your pediatrician's office. So in those first few days and weeks, they're going to screen you for postpartum depression as well. So we're kind of have that in place. But you are so right. When you are a NICU mom, you're not seeing the pediatrician right away. Mm-hmm. And there's not a great way to notice these folks. In an ideal world, there should be, for NICU babies, is not just a team who's caring for the baby, it should be caring for the parents also, including help about depression and anxiety with having this NICU baby, which are inevitable. And I don't believe that system is in place or something that we think of now. I know we often have NICU case managers who help with things like coordinating the appointments, but you're right. Mom often falls through the cracks, and it's unfortunate. And I don't think it has to be that way. Now I think about it, like it's not like terribly difficult. I think a lot of it is just like silly things like the documentation piece. Oh, where do I put in the chart that I gave mom this test, but it's for the baby, that kind of thing. Those little things. You're stimulating me to ask my own NICU colleagues, what do we do for moms who are in the NICU and have a NICU baby? Right. When I was there, obviously it's been a long time. It was nothing. Like they didn't do anything. I don't know what your experience was.
It was
better.
It was nothing. I mean, nurses were definitely checking how are you doing. It's not as if they completely
sure, but no like formal.
No. Yeah. Now they're, interestingly enough, the hospital that our son was in the NICU at, the local news anchor who also suffered from PPA and PPD, I'll be interviewing her next week, but she did a story on that particular hospital. They actually have an integrated unit specifically for NICU moms, psychiatrists, psychologists,
Oh,
as well as a counselor, a therapist.
right.
And their sole job is to look after NICU moms
Okay.
and to make sure that, which there are not many hospitals. So I'm hoping that more hospitals see that model and say, this is important.
Absolutely.
It's a gap of care. You have to figure out how to make that a reality. But it didn't
Sure.
exist when I was there. I'm just glad it does
Me
now,
neither.
but
And
it didn't then.
how long was your son in the NICU?
44 days.
Okay.
44 days too long, but 44 days, as every NICU mom says. Yeah. So if you, Dr. Nicole, I'm wondering, so if a woman does say, okay, yes, I am going to someone because I have either PPD or PPA
Mhm.
or something along in that whole perinatal spectrum of
Mhm.
mental issues, what are some of the things that they would do to help treat, just so that people have an idea of, if I'm diagnosed with this, these are some of the treatment options that may be available to me depending
Yes.
upon the severity of what I'm dealing with?
Sure. So medications are certainly an option. Typical depression medications are certainly an option. Like Wellbutrin is a common one that we use. Sometimes Paxil. It really depends, and that would be in consultation with a psychiatrist who feels comfortable prescribing those.
Right.
Because your OB is not going to prescribe those on a long term
Right.
basis. They may pick it up during your pregnancy, but afterwards it's going to be a psychiatrist or a family medicine doctor might do it because they feel they have we'll see the whole family in perspective, or even an internal medicine doctor might do it, but it's going to be someone who feels comfortable treating depression on a long-term basis. And then talk therapy, just like therapy in any other circumstances. There are people who are certified or who have specialization in perinatal mental health. So they've gone through some additional training, whether that's classes or, workshop or curriculum, those kinds of things to get more experience in that. And that's where that website, Postpartum Support International, is great because it will tell you people who are specifically interested in therapeutic treatment for people with perinatal mood concerns.
So if you're maybe breastfeeding your baby and you're wondering, like, I'm on these medications, can I take these? Who can verifiably answer that question and give you good data? Because every time you talk to, like, my pediatrician's like, you should never do it, or you should always do it. Like, where's the good, valuable information that you're like, and I know it's case by case, but who's the person to ask?
That's a very good question. And there's not like a certain specific person who's going to say great, because there's some OBs who are going to say, I don't ask your pediatrician about breastfeeding. We don't know a lot about breastfeeding. They may say, ask your psychiatrist. Your psychiatrist is going to bounce it back. There are some websites and data. There's ReproTalks, which is a information source about how medications interact with breastfeeding. There's another one called LactMed, LACTMED, where you can look up information as well. I will say, in general, everything has risk and benefits. And it's also something that's very challenging to study because not too many people, one, the pharmaceutical industry generally doesn't do studies in pregnant folks. That's trying to change, at least because they didn't even offer people the option if you're breastfeeding to be in a study. That option was taken away. Now we're saying people should at least have the option to do so if they want to, but then not a lot of people necessarily want to be part of studies when you're pregnant or postpartum. So it's really going to be hard information to get. It's based on historical data from what we have. Most of the antidepressants, the SSRIs, are going to be fine with breastfeeding. Sometimes they may make baby a little bit sleepy, so you have to worry about that. But most of them are going to be fine. There's nothing that jumps out as like, oh my God, you absolutely don't take that one, kind of thing.
Yeah. Well, I know you have your own podcast, which is fabulous, by the way. And I know you just did an interview with a specialist specifically focused on perinatal mood disorders, and super informative. I was like, man, this would have been helpful all those years ago. So I'm going to I'll definitely make sure that we link to it in the show notes. But I do want to ask you, Dr. Nicole, from one NICU mom to another, how did your NICU experience inform your work now as a hospitalist working in OBGYN?
Yeah. So and I guess I should share a little bit about my NICU experience. I wasn't expecting to have a NICU baby. So I knew my daughter had a rare intestinal malformation called duodenal atresia. So, which is like 1 in 5,000 or 10,000 pregnancies or something like that. So very rare. Of course, an OBGYN is going to have a child with it. So then we met with the pediatric surgeon and they're like, oh, these babies are born full term. They get surgery. They're in the hospital for 3 or 4 days and then they go home. So that's kind of what we were expecting. And then I went into labor at 32 weeks and just blew through labor. So she went to the NICU and there were just so many like things that it's so hard to explain to anyone who hasn't had a NICU baby what it's like to have a NICU baby.
Well, you're among the choir. We all get it here.
Yeah,
so
especially when it's unexpected. So, for me, I cried every single day, literally. So I had to tell myself I'm going to limit myself to crying 3 times a day. So I would like space it out. So that was just my way of having control over a situation that I had no control over. So I would cry like 3 times a day. And then it was just, see, now I'm like, I've gotten so into the experience. I forgot the question. Like, what did you even ask me to?
No, I think that, first of all, I think knowing the NICU story is important. So thank you for sharing that. I think I'm curious how living through that, because it's one thing to study it.
How it informed my experience. Yes.
How did that shift when you became a doctor and you lived it?
Yeah. So definitely I think the biggest thing is giving people some hope. People get very, understandably so, nervous and scared. Like they go straight to, oh my God, my baby's going to die because my baby has to go to the NICU. So just sharing my experience of, you know what, my daughter was born 8 weeks early and she spent a month in the NICU. It's very difficult. I will share how I cried like literally every day, even after she came home. And that it gets better. It is something that you will never, ever, ever forget, but it does get better and you will look back on it and it won't be so big and so bad and so scary the vast majority of the time. Obviously, you can't guarantee that for everyone's experience, but for most people, your baby comes through, your baby's going, depending how early your baby is born, but the NICU does miraculous things these days with babies surviving and thriving, even born quite early. So I just try to share my experience and give people some sense of hope that it's not, all is not lost. And you have more strength than you realize also when you have a baby in the NICU.
We often say you have to dig deep into your meshy panties and like figure it out whenever you have a NICU baby.
You absolutely do. You absolutely do.
What was your anxiety like? I know you had a baby after your NICU baby. Like, what was that like, Dr. Nicole?
So that's interesting. So my anxiety with my first, when she came home, I was worried about her surgery, like where she had her intestines reconnected. I was just paranoid that it was just going to fall apart, that it was, and then of course the milestone. That's another thing I tell people. The milestones will forever until your child is like, 3 or 4 and like has met some things in the beginning. At least for me, I obsessed about when is she going to crawl? When is she going to walk? My NICU baby didn't walk until after she was 1. So those things kind of get you. Interestingly, for the second pregnancy, and I think everyone's a little bit different. For me, I felt like I had been through this once before and we got through it and it was like, I can do this. And I felt like all of the worry, all of the anxiousness wasn't helpful for me. So I realized I'm going to approach this differently. I'm going to enjoy it. I'm going to kind of go with the flow of things. And so things just felt a lot easier and actually a lot less stressful for me. I actually was not as worried if something happened. Of course, there's that period of like around the time, and I worried, was I just going to go into labor early again, that kind of thing. But especially as I got past 32 weeks, and it was like, okay, we can just keep on going now. And the one thing that you'll realize is that there will always be like something with when you have children. There, like my second one had some issues where she had to get ultrasounds of her kidneys afterwards. Because they were concerned about her kidneys. As a parent, there's always going to be something that pops up. So for me, it helped me to believe that I am strong. I can get through this. I can do things. I actually wasn't that nervous for my second pregnancy.
You know what? I hope that gives some moms some hope because I too had a baby after our NICU baby. I didn't find myself anxious until we got to the delivery part, but only because I had had an emergency C-section with the fifth and decided to do a VBAC with our sixth without drugs.
Okay.
So, I know I was one of those moms, but I do think it's helpful for people to hear. You may not always be this hyper alert. You may grow and you may get stronger and you may learn how to deal with things differently. And when you walk into another pregnancy, you're not walking into it the same way because you're not the same person anymore.
Exactly.
I really love that.
Yeah.
Well, I always ask, my last question is always wisdom and advice because I think everyone has good lived experience. If there's a mom, Dr. Nicole, who's listening to this and she feels like she may be suffering either from PPD or PPA, what would be your encouragement to her as a mom who has lived through some hard things, but also as an OB-GYN?
Yeah, just please get help and do so in a way that serves you. And what I mean by that is that sometimes the first place you go, that therapist might not fit, might not be the right person. So don't be afraid to change things and keep looking until you find a place that is supportive because you deserve to feel joy. There's so much joy in being a mother and watching your child grow up. And you deserve to experience that and see those moments because I can tell you now, looking at my 16-year-old, almost 17-year-old who's getting ready to go to college and the time flies. Everyone says that, but it really does. So know that you deserve to experience and feel joy. And so get that help so you're not letting that, or so that depression and anxiety is not the thief of your joy.
That was really beautifully said. I know that you have some great resources online. So if someone wants to connect with you online, where should they go?
Yeah. So my podcast is called All About Pregnancy and Birth. And there we talk about birth stories. I talk about topics. I interview folks. And then I'm on Instagram at Dr. Nicole Rankins. I have information there. And then I have a childbirth education class and a free birth plan class. That's at my website, drnicole.rankins.com.
So in the birth plan, Dr. Nicole, do you address someone who has gone through maybe a traumatic or a hard pregnancy and maybe how they address a birth plan after that?
Actually, I don't. And that's something that I gear up more towards people having their first baby, but that is something to think about because you do want to have, if you've had, and this is, something to add, if you've had a traumatic birth your first time, definitely be upfront about saying the things that are important to you or that you're worried or that you're nervous or that you're concerned. That's really for any birth period. You really want a doctor who is sympathetic and compassionate about that and not just like blowing you off or rushing you off. Again, you deserve to have that care where you feel supported when you go through another pregnancy, because for some reason, for some people, it can be challenging.
Yeah. I know I looked at my OB after when I was delivering our sixth baby and I said, I know this is a small thing, but I don't want to wear a hospital gown. And she said, okay, just wear whatever you want, and she's like, that's it. That was the big thing that you had to ask. And I was like, yes. And I didn't want to be attached to an IV pole. So, we compromised, we figured it out, but I think that that's a great point. Well, I love all of what you share. I think it's really exceptional. Your credentials are impressive because I think sometimes people want to know, like, is the expert that I'm listening to really well-versed in what they speak about?
And which I am. Yes, I will say that I am.
Can confirm. I looked at your stuff and it's impressive. So so if you love what you heard here, make sure that you go listen to Dr. Nicole and all the other places. But thanks for joining us today. Well, it is always a joy to talk to someone who has such great experience. They're well-versed in what it is that they do every day, but it's an even greater joy to talk to someone who knows what it's like to be in the neonatal intensive care unit. So Dr. Nicole Rankins is the best of both. She gets a chance to share about her wisdom and knowledge in medicine, but also her lived experience in the NICU. So I hope that you enjoyed that extra special piece of today's very first episode of this brand new season. There are a couple of things that I want to touch on in my 2-minute take. The first being, and we we mentioned it, but I think it's worth diving in a little deeper, is this influx of social media and how credible are the sources that you're listening to. So on the one hand, you have the ability to find moms, maybe by searching the hashtags PPD or PPA and finding other moms who may be experiencing similar things as you. So you sort of find solidarity. And in many cases, connect with people that you would have never been able to connect to had it not been for social media. And then on the flip side of that, you may be listening to experts, but you're like, are they real? Or, oh my gosh, I'm seeing what this other kid is doing or what this other family is doing. And now I have anxiety about what I should have been doing all along, or now I have more anxiety about things that I should be worrying about. So this balance, we are definitely going to be talking about that later in this season. But I think this balance of finding community, you can certainly find it at Hand to Hold, and finding this really life-giving community, but at the same time, making sure that the sources that you're listening to are credible, that they have the credentials. I know that at the very beginning of the episode, I ran through all of Dr. Nicole's resources. So she is an excellent follow on social media if you get the chance to follow her. So just making sure that the people that are informing you are informed themselves. And then the second thing is, I was really struck by this. I was actually expecting her to answer it a little bit differently when I was asking her, were you more anxious with your second pregnancy after your NICU baby? And her response of, you know what? No, I felt empowered. I felt like this really hard thing had happened and I survived it. And I walked into my second pregnancy with less anxiety and more joy. So I was not expecting, I don't think there's a right or a wrong answer to that, but I didn't know that she was going to answer it that way. And I'm hopeful that that gives, if you are listening to this thinking, I don't know if I should have another baby because I don't know what that would do to my own mental health, that there's a great example of what's possible. It could actually go maybe a completely different way than what you're imagining right now, that anxiety that you feel may sort of bubble away and be less than the joy that you are experiencing about being able to be pregnant again and bring another life into the world. So I really loved her perspective. It was so good. You know, if you really enjoyed today's episode, at least as much as I did, it's our very first one of this season. I'm loving it. If you're loving it, make sure that you go and give it a rating either on Spotify or Apple Podcast or wherever it is that you listen to podcasts. Make sure that you share it with a friend. And if you want to make sure that you're not going to miss any of the episodes this season or really any other season, make sure that you subscribe. If you want to see our faces, that's always the fun component. You can always log on to our Hand to Hold channel over on YouTube and you can watch us on video and also listen to what it is that we have to say. I think you're going to love them both. You know, next week we have a really great personal story about PPD and PPA, and this is a little bit about what you're going to hear.
Truly, Kathryn, when I was in the moment, I was really struggling, and I was struggling alone. I felt like I couldn't even talk to my husband about it. I think looking back, I probably had this, or the beginning of all of this, when my baby was just a few months old. So I went through those newborn stages, the early stages. I went back to work. And that's when I realized, you know, what I was doing was not sustainable. It does take time, and it takes reaching out for help and leaning on somebody, whether that's a trusted family member or a counselor or a therapist. You know, we don't have to suffer alone. And, you know, once you start talking about it and using that trusted source, things do get better.